Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark and freilich, begashmis and beruchnis. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Eikev, so Shabbos Mevorchim Elul, and there are many, many messages. Let's start as usual with a tefillah. This week, Chodesh Elul, we have the Minig Yisrael that we're going to start saying Kapitel Chav Zayin, so I'll start early, and it's not going to do any harm. We'll start with the prayer of Kapitel Chav Zayin, Pasuk Zayin. Shema Adonai Koili, Ekra v'chaneini v'aneini. We cry out to Hashem, Hashem, hear my voice as I call. Be gracious to me and answer me. So here we are asking from Hashem to listen to all the tefillos of Bnei Yisrael b'chol makom shehem, and to be memale mishalosam l'teva l'veracha. B'teva nirvanigla. Parshas Eikev, like the Parshas that we're learning now, Dvarim, Voschanon, are monumental Parshas that contain many, many fundamental concepts, themes, and commandments of Yiddishkeit. In this week's Parsha, we have the second Parsha of Shema. So it mentions all the major mitzvahs, many of the major mitzvahs. But there's a central theme, which I never heard spoken about, woven together as I'm going to speak today. But there was something in the Sefer Hatanya of the Alter Rebbe that made me think this way. But first, let me point out where in this week's Parsha we see this. So I see this message 3 times, and the message is connecting to tzaddikim. Firstly, Moshe Rabbeinu, as he's recounting the history to the Yidden, and he's farbringing with them, he mentions their travels, and then he also mentions how Aaron HaKohen Gadol passed away, and Rashi brings out, the pasuk says, and then Rashi, and the next pasuk, brings down the word, why did Moshe over here mention Aaron? And then he spoke about the smashing of the luchas, that he had to break the luchas. And Rashi brings down, V'samach Moshe techochazu l'shviris haluchas. Loymar shekoshem misoshen sel tzadikim l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ki yoyim shenestavru be'aluchas. When the tzaddik passes on, it's like the tablets, the holy tablets were broken. We're not going to speak about the meaning of this Maimer Azal today, but just the idea that it mentions that concept of the passing of a tzaddik. By the way, I forgot to mention, this past week, we had Chof of the Yom Hailul of the Rebbe's father, who was a giant of a man, a source of inspiration, and an intense, holy, high level of holiness. And that also is a connection to this week's Parsha, as we say that the Shabbos, everything that happened in the whole week, Vayichulu, becomes elevated. Now, later on in the Parsha, so that's one sign, one clear mention of the concept of tzaddikim. Later on in the Parsha comes a very, very famous pasuk, where it's a famous Gemara, there's a lot discussed, and that is the pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden, Va'ato, and now, Yisrael, Ma Hashem Alikecha, Sheil Mimach, what is Hashem asking of you already? Kiyim liyiras Hashem Alikecha, to fear Him. Okay, so first we have to understand why he's saying Va'ata now, and we'll get back to that soon. Rashi right away says over here, why he's saying now. Rashi explains it means despite. That means even though we messed up so much, still, even now, the Eibishter expects that we should do this. In other words, he's interested in us, in the relationship, etc. On this pasuk, when Moshe says, what does the Eibishter want from you already? But only to fear him. So it makes it sound like it's the easy thing. The Gemara has the famous Klotz Kasher, Oto Yirem Milsa Zutrasihi. Is fear such an easy thing to accomplish that Moshe Rabbeinu just says, Ma Hashem Alikecha Sheil Mimach Kiyim liyiras Hashem Alikecha? And the Gemara answers yes. L'gabe Moshe Milsa Zutrasihi. For Moshe, it was an easy thing. And over here, the Alter Rebbe in chapter 42 of the Holy Tanya asks a klotz kasha. Is Moshe talking to himself? What do you mean? In Lagabe Moshe Milsizutrasi. Yes, for Moshe it's an easy thing. But he's talking to Bnei Yisrael. He's talking to us and he's demanding from us. And he's saying, what does Hashem want from you already? Only to fear him. And if he's talking to us, the question is fear such an easy thing for us? So we have to understand, what's the Gemara's answer by saying, in Lagabe Moshe Milsizutrasi? That yes, for Moshe it was an easy thing. But he's talking to us. So what does it help? That for Moshe it's an easy thing. Yeah, Moshe could split the Red Sea. Moshe could do a lot of things. But what does it have to do with us? So that's another pasuk where we have Moshe talking to Bnei Yisrael, and the Gemara says that, and seemingly implies, and we'll soon have to understand the answer to this question Alter Rebbe gives, and we'll get back to the answer of the Alter Rebbe in a minute, that it's Moshe Rabbeinu's influence that makes it also for us an easy thing. And finally, in the end of the Parsha, we have the pasuk which says that we should connect, we should connect, and Rashi brings down that Kol Adav B'Talmud Chacham Kilu Nidbak B'Shchina Mamish. Whoever connects himself, the pasuk is Kapitel Yud Aleph pasuk Chav Beis Ki Im Shomer Tishmanu Kol HaMitzvah Zeis Asher Mitzvah Chama Seisa Lav Hashem Lekechem Lechet B'Chol Drachav U'Ledavka Boi. And Rashi says we should cleave to him. Ef Shaloi Makein, is it possible to cleave to Hashem? He's a fiery being, so to speak. Connect to disciples and to wise people. And that will be considered as if you cleaved unto me. So over here also, let us ask, what do you mean? In a way, by saying that you could be causing problems. The whole idea of Judaism, that everyone could go directly to the Eibishter, so to speak, we might say, we might argue. So why do we have to say, Kol Adavik b'Talmud Chacham, whoever cleaved into a Talmud Chacham, Kilon Nidbar b'Shchina Mamish? So let's first talk about this. Why should we say that? What is the meaning of it? Kol Adavik b'Talmud Chacham, Kilon Nidbar b'Shchina Mamish. So, in chapter 2 of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe discusses this, and the Alter Rebbe discusses the role of Tzadikim, of Roshei B'nai Yisrael, the leaders of a generation. Before we get to what the Alter Rebbe says, and what comes out from the Alter Rebbe, let's first try to understand, what does it mean, Kol Adav B'Tam Chacham, Kilon Nidbar B'Shchina Mamish, so much so that it becomes a halacha. If you have a choice, your daughter should marry the child of a Talmud Chacham, or the child of a businessman. We say marry the daughter of a Talmud Chacham, the son of a Talmud Chacham. If you have an opportunity to go into business with someone who's not a Talmud Chacham, or to go with someone who's a Talmud Chacham, go into business with a Talmud Chacham. This is Jewish law. All learned out this obligation because Kol Adav Talmud Chacham Kilon Nidbar B'Shchina Mamish. So one answer is obviously because when you look at a Talmud Chacham hanging around Talmidei Chachamim, which means scholars, which means people that do the right thing, which means people that are following Hashem's wisdom, Hashem's Torah, so that will also be a lesson for you. Like Sichas Chumash Talmidei Chachamim, Sichim Limud. In other words, hanging around, being close, being associated with these Talmidei Chachamim will bring you into contact, both looking at their conduct and the way they live their lives. You'll see the right way how you're meant to live your life. Oire Chaim. Like there's a famous word that they say, one of the Talmidim of the Maggid said, he went to the Maggid, not to see the way the Maggid davens and learns, but to see how he ties his shoelaces. In other words, he wanted to see how you can be close to Hashem even in tying your shoelaces. So that's one idea. By being in the presence of a Talmud Chacham, You will learn how to become closer to the Eibush to yourself. Because their conduct will be reflective of the best way to get close to Hashem. So therefore, by being close to this Talmidei Chachamim, you also get yourself closer to Hashem, because therefore you will learn how to do the things the way that brings you closer to Hashem. Okay, so that would be one answer. Another answer could be, what is Torah? The Torah is the wisdom of Hashem. So if you hang around a person who knows Gan Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, and who always learns, so that person is a walking Sefer Torah. So we have a Sefer Torah of ink and parchment, and then we have a Sefer Torah of flesh and blood. So here we have a Sefer Torah. So by connecting to this Tzadik, to this Talmud Chacham, you're connecting to a Sefer Torah, so therefore that brings you close to Hashem. You're always connected to the Torah. And that Torah projects, emanates, gives forth wisdom of Hashem. So that will bring you close to Hashem. But you still ask, the problem with these two explanations still doesn't seem to be, why would that be better than just daven? I should daven myself. Why do I have to say kol hadav v'tamid chachamim? Kilu nidu b'shchina, and it's a mitzvah l'davka b'y. Why do we have to waste time with this intermediary? Just go straight to Hashem. And the answer is, yes, you could do that. But even that, we have tzadikim. Anochi oimed bein Hashem elekechem ubeinechem. They bring us closer. Why? Because they are divine revelation. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Shayich Ve'emunah, that Shitif ime midas harachmim, Hashem brought His mercy, His attribute of mercy, into this world in the presence and in the bodies of holy people. So the real meaning of Kol Hadav V'Talmid Chacham Kilu Nidbach B'Shechina Mamish, and the Alter Rebbe adds the words Mamish in chapter 2 of the Tanya, is because that Talmid Chacham, that Tzadik, is himself a physical manifestation, personification, embodiment of Chochmah Datzilus, of wisdom of Hashem. And that's the ultimate. Now, of course, I'm not negating the simple levels of Kol Talmid Chacham as the obligation of Shulchan Aruch to marry into the family of a Talmid Chacham, do business in Talmid Chacham. That is also true. But the ultimate level, the ultimate truth of this concept is obviously when we're talking about Talmidei Chachamim who are righteous, tzadikim. And that's why the Alter Rebbe adds, Kol Hadav B'Talmid Chacham, Kilu Nidbach B'Shechina Mamish. Only that explanation really explains it. Otherwise, like we said before. So this person who knows Shas, that means he doesn't have an evil inclination. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have, let's say, necessarily haughtiness or anger or jealousy, etc. Of course, a Talmid Chacham could also have that, and there's nothing wrong. But if that was the case, then it would be more difficult to understand why Kol Hadav B'Talmid Chacham Kilu Nidbach B'Shechina. To say such a sentence. And therefore, the real meaning is that we're talking about somebody who is a divine attribute. See Tanya chapter 2, where he elaborates on this, how all Neshamas Yisrael come from this level of Chochmah Datzilus. See there, that's Chochmosei Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and how by the Tzadik, that level is the most revealed, and through the Tzadik, that level will be revealed in you. In other words, through connecting to the Tzadik, he brings out your source, which is the same source as the Tzadik. We all come from the same source, but it's through our connecting to that Tzadik, where that source is the most revealed, that he brings out our source in each of us. Based on that explanation, and now And this is what brought me to connect the pasuk at the end of the parsha, L'davka boy, with the pasuk V'ata Yisrael Ma Hashem Elikecha She'el Mi'imach. Also in Parshas Eikev, because in Tanya chapter 42, he also talks about tzaddikim, which is interesting because Chabad Chassidus emphasizes more how each one should reach levels of understanding of God and love of God, not just to ride on the coattails of the Tzadik, but that he himself should work hard to reach levels of spiritual development and growth in your mind and in your heart. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that we should understand this, and we should come to Ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levav b'chol nafshecha. So, let's get back to the question. The Gemara says on the pasuk Ma Hashem Elokecha She'el Mi'imach Kim Lidas Hashem Elokecha. How could Moshe Rabbeinu say that it's such an easy thing? Is it such an easy thing? And the Gemara answers in L'gaba Moshe Milsa Zutrasehi. And we ask on that, what do you mean? So what? Just because it's easy for Moshe, therefore it's easy for us. Is he talking to himself? That is the question that Alter Rebbe asks in chapter 42. And what does he answer? Because he is addressing the Moshe in every one of us. There's the Moshe Rabbeinu who's the leader, similar to the concept of chapter 2 that he discussed. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the Rebbe. He's the head of the entire Jewish nation. He influences the whole nation. He makes God a reality by touching and reaching the soul of every Jew, everyone's neshama. He's the root, which is connected to all the branches. And the Alter Rebbe explains, what does it mean in L'gaba Moshe Milsa Zutrasehi? Get in touch with your Moshe Rabbeinu, which is in you, which is in every one of us. I.e., what does mean Moshe in every single one of us? The idea of studying and learning and understanding, das, making God pnimiisdik, inward. As the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 3, what does das mean? Yitke machshavte bechoizik. Concentrate, attach yourself to all these ideas of God as the true reality, as God as creator, and whatever is discussed in Pnimius HaTorah. When a person will exercise the Moshe within him, his connection to the Moshe Rabbeinu, the Moshe as our teacher who teaches us about godliness, then he will see how Yira is Milsa Zutrasehi. So over here again, without the explanation of Chassidus, it is always going to be a question. L'gaba Moshe Milsa Zutrasehi. But what about everyone else? And then all the commentators speak about it. I forgot exactly now how they answered this question. Some people say the Va'ata now is going on the Deira Midbar because they saw miracles, but also connected with the fact that they are hanging around Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, in L'gaba Moshe Milsa Zutrasehi, L'gaba Moshe, it's a small thing. So therefore, those that are living in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu or on the influence of Moshe Rabbeinu, it also becomes an easy thing for them. But again, what does that have to do with our generation? What does that have to do with Tavshin Pei Beis? And still, it also means, it seems like still it's a Davar Noisev, it's superimposed. Mainly, it's Moshe Rabbeinu. And through Moshe, we get it. But according to the answer from the Alter Rebbe, there's a Moshe in us. Our connection to Moshe Rabbeinu is in the DNA. Because there's the root soul, which is connected to all the souls. And the root soul is not someone else, but our very essence, etc. That's not revealed in the branches so much. And therefore, by being connected to the root, that's what comes out. So, my friends, learn chapter 2 of the Tanya, learn chapter 42 of the Tanya. That will be a good exercise for this weekend, Friday night, Shabbos, Kodesh, etc. And this is an amazing preparation for Rosh Chodesh Elul and for the coming new year. This week we have the message of being connected to a Tzadik, the Rebbe's father, his story of Mesiras Nefesh, his story of serving Hashem without compromise, his story of being connected to the Eibishter regardless of circumstances, is what inspires us to this very day. And we see what's going on right now in Russia. There's a kinus, a convention of rabbis, of shluchim of the Rebbe, that have gone there to that city of Almaty, Kazakhstan. So we see that even though the government, the Rishoyim, the wicked people tried to stamp out Judaism, there's nothing left of them today. But the people that were inspired by Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Schneerson are still inspired, and his spirit continues on, and his inspiration continues on. And talking about tzaddikim, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok was particularly a big gaon, a super genius in mysticism, in Kabbalah. He was called a Makubal. So he really was living a different plane of existence. He wrote Torah while he was in exile. So he literally was able to transport himself to a higher realm and able to overcome adversity and challenges, even though his body was affected and it affected his health. But in the end, he triumphed through the triumph of the Spirit. So the Eibishter should help that we should be inspired now in the month of Elul and make resolutions to connect ourselves stronger to tzaddikim, to the Reish B'nai Yisrael, to the Torah of the Reish B'nai Yisrael. And kol adam v'talmid chacham ki nidbar b'shechina mamish, and bring out the Moshe that's within us. And this will bring us closer to the Eibishter. And this will guarantee that every single Yid, b'chol b'nei Yisrael, b'chol makom sheim, should have a ksiva, chesima teva, l'shana teva, u'mesuka. Broadcasting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.